This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Catherine Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here will focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. Whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Catherine Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so honored you're here. Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. If you have not checked your calendar, let me be the first to remind you that the holidays are approaching. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to stress you out. But I do know that with the holidays coming, that also means that perhaps you might have on your mind, what food am I going to start cooking? And for some of y'all, it's an easy thing. Maybe you don't have food allergies or dietary restrictions in your household. And so it's a straight shot. You've been cooking recipes for decades, and it's time to just pull those recipes out and start doing them again. For some of you, perhaps that was your life before, and then now you find yourself with a child who has a food allergy or a dietary restriction, and the holidays that you used to love feel a lot more stressful. I thought it might be a great idea to have a great friend of mine, Vanessa, who is well-versed in 2 things: in having children who have food allergies. One having children, she has 6 girls, but having children who have food allergies, and then also loving cooking and baking, that she has a real passion for that. And so I thought that there was no one better really to tie together the thing that maybe brings you stress right now or some overwhelm, and how to find some joy through that. So in our conversation today, Vanessa and I are going to absolutely talk about how they found out that their children had food allergies and what they did, like what specialists they went to see and what that entailed, but also how did that rock their family in the hard ways and in the good ways, and what became the fruit of that. Sorry, food analogy, my apologies. But what became the fruit of that obstacle, that challenge that they had in their family, and how it's grown into a really amazing thing. So I'm so honored today to have Vanessa Kraft as my guest. She's the mom of 6 daughters. One of them has multiple food allergies, and she also has a set of twins that were preemies and spent some time in the neonatal intensive care unit. Because of her daughter's multiple food allergies, she started a bakery called Que Bueno Bakery here in Austin. And she wanted to start it because she wanted it to be safe for people with food allergies and dietary restrictions, but also delicious, because everyone deserves to have fun in any celebration. So with that, let's chat. Well, I'm so happy to have my friend Vanessa here. Vanessa, thank you for being here with us today. You are, I know you're younger than me, but I always look at the things that you do, and I think I want to be Vanessa when I grow up. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about food allergies, but before we get into all of that stuff, I know that you've got a couple of NICU babies of your own. So maybe sort of introduce people to a little bit about your NICU stay and sort of how that impacted your family.
Yeah, for sure. So we have 6 daughters, ranging from 14, and the baby is 4. And so we had 3 kids, and then we got pregnant with twins. So our twins were a big surprise. They are identical twins. And for those of you with multiples, they were like mono di. So there's like all these different classifications for what kind of twins, but it's the kind of twin that it was important to monitor them closely, because one of them could take more of like the food than the other. So I was really closely monitored, but everything was like very on track. Like everything developed the way it should. It wasn't until, actually, I think I had just like the day before I went into labor, I had seen both the doctor that was like in charge of monitoring them on the ultrasound and my OB. And I was like, what is it looking like? Like, are we going to make it? Like, how far do you think I'm going to get? Because with twins, kind of full term is 38 weeks. So everything's kind of shifted up. And so I was right at around 33 weeks, and they both were like, everything looks great. Like they're both growing at a very similar pace. Like everything looks good. you should be able to cook them for a couple more weeks. And I was like, awesome, that sounds great. So I went into labor the next day. And so it was like somewhere in the middle of my 33rd week. And so my water broke. I called my doctor. I was like completely in shock because I had just
Sure.
been expecting a couple more weeks. I had been, especially with three little kids. So my oldest, when the twins were born, my oldest was 5. So we had
My
a
gosh.
5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and like an 18-month-old or something. So
So 2 weeks is kind of a big deal whenever they're
yeah,
that age.
yeah. So like 2 weeks, I was like really counting on it. Um, and so they took us into the hospital, and having twins is just very different. Like my nurse never left my side. Like they don't have other patients. Like they sit there in that room with you for hours, um, and just like watch you very closely. And so I think if I'm remembering the things correctly, like if you make it to 34 weeks is kind of the cutoff to they decide whether or not to put you in the NICU. But if you have the baby before 34 weeks, it's like an automatic NICU admission. So they sent in a bunch of people to come and talk to me to prep me for that because again, this was all very we
Right.
were not expecting an early, premature labor. Um and also having twins, like you have to deliver in the ER or not the ER, sorry, the
OR.
OR,
Yeah.
just in case something happens and they have to like
Sure.
do a quick emergency C-section or something. So it was all a lot. And so they kind of wheel me into the OR. There's like teams of people for each twin. Like each twin had like 4 specialists like ready to check them. And everything I was able to deliver like regularly. They weren't able to, they didn't have to do a C-section. And so they kind of whisked the twins off, and they were both 5 pounds. So one was 5 pounds,
Wow.
one was 5'9". And I think that's like I remember that being like another thing that if
Five
kids are
pounds
born
is a big
after
deal. Yeah.
34 weeks and above 5 pounds, then they don't have to go to the NICU as long as all the breathing and everything is fine. And so I remember like begging them, like, please, like they're 5 pounds, like let them stay with me. Like they're great, they're fine, everything's fine. In
Everything's
this
fine. No, nothing to see here. Yeah.
yeah, like all the crazy hormones and like all the people and the OR lights and all
Sure.
the and all the it was my first time having an epidural, so like I was like really loopy. Anyways, and they were like, I'm sure I sounded just like, you know, like kind of out of my mind. So I was like, please, please, like I can take care of that. But they anyway, so thankfully they didn't listen to me. They took care of my children the way they should have. And they were in the NICU. I think maybe for the first day they kind of were watched carefully, but they kind of moved us to the bay of the NICU that was feeder growers. Like everything, they were breathing pretty good. They were able to eat pretty well. They basically just had to kind of watch them and make sure that they were continuing to feed well and grow. Um,
How long were they in the NICU, Vanessa?
So they were in the NICU for about 11 days.
Okay.
And thankfully our hospital, we were lucky they were like redoing a wing. So I was able to just stay in like this empty room in the hospital.
Wow.
So I could stay there. Also with twins, like I really needed to get my milk production going. So they were very, you know, they were very firm with me, like you need to pump every 3 hours. Like you have
Right.
to, they're too young to latch. So I had to pump every 3 hours. And thankfully my milk came in fine and I was able to like make buckets of milk. But it was hard. It was like 1 hour of sleep and then like pump
Sure.
and then like spend 1 hour with the twins and then like
Well, I do remember it's interesting that you say that you were feeling a little bit sort of out of sorts because I remember coming to visit you and your husband when y'all were admitted to the NICU, like got the
yes,
text
yeah.
and I was like, Brandon and Vanessa are in the NICU and you were incredibly calm, like everything's going to be fine. And I remember leaving and thinking, wow, Vanessa's really handling this well. And you were. I mean, you may not have seen that from the outside, but for me to see you at the hospital, I remember thinking like she's sort of taking this all in stride. So I think that sort of has sort of transgressed like all the things that I see you do in life. You sort of just we all have a moment of freak out, but I think you have this great ability, Vanessa, to just assess and be like, okay, this is where we are. It's what we're
Oh,
going to do. And you kind of move forward. And I think that that has served you well, certainly with all six of your most precious little girls. But I know that some of them had some things pop up. Your oldest, food allergies, and then one of your twins. So maybe let's talk a little bit about we're getting ready to enter into the holidays, and food allergies sort of get a lot of press during the holidays. But maybe let's first talk about, how did you find out that your kids had food allergies? What were some of the things that happened that put up some red flags to you?
yeah. So one of our twins actually ended up having a food allergy, but really our big foray into food allergies was with our first daughter. Um, so she has a dairy, egg, tree nut, and peanut food allergy. So when she was born, I exclusively nursed her. And so we didn't start giving until my milk ran out around like 8 months. Um, and that's when we switched over to formula. We just used whatever formula it was. We were new to the game.
Right.
So the pediatrician recommended this formula that was milk based, which we didn't know anything about food allergies. Like, this was nothing on our radar to watch out for. And so we gave her first bottle of formula that was milk based, and immediately broke out in hives. Like, eyes started swelling shut, like red welts like all over her body, and we knew something obviously was wrong. So we like called our pediatrician. It was like during the day, and they were like, we didn't even have Benadryl. Like, we were such early parents. We were such new parents. Like, we didn't even have like children's Benadryl, or so we lived right next to a pharmacy, thankfully, like CVS. And so my husband like ran over, grabbed the Benadryl. They were like, get her the Benadryl. It was right before 5. So it was like just hitting rush hour. They were like, you will get to Dell Children's faster than if an ambulance picks you up in this traffic. So jump in the car, monitor her breathing, make sure she is breathing. If she is not breathing, call 911, like pull over, call 911 immediately, but just get to the ER, like just get to Dell Children's. So that's what we did. And thankfully, like, even though she was like swelling and breaking out and everything, thankfully her throat never closed up. So she was breathing. We had to keep her awake because the Benadryl was like knocking her out. And also, I think probably her body was just kind of trying to
Sure.
deal with this. So I remember her like getting very sleepy and wanting to fall asleep, and us like trying to keep her awake on the ride over as we like raced down 35 to Dell. They saw us very quickly. They like again gave her some more Benadryl. And then that kind of started our our food allergy journey. Very quickly, we had to find an allergist, like a specialist, and because we had no idea what it was. Like, even in the ER, they were like, "Oh, it's probably a dairy allergy." So it wasn't that formula was bad; it was that there was
Sure, it was that
dairy
it
in
was
the
dairy.
formula, and
So
she,
when you guys found an allergist, Vanessa, maybe for people who are unaware of what allergies mean and sort of how they diagnose those and treat those, what
yeah,
was that visit like with your allergist? What are some things that they did to sort of assess where she was, and sort of
yeah.
maybe the long term? Is this something? I know sometimes you grow out of an allergy and sometimes you don't.
Yes. Yes. So our allergist is like an allergist and immunologist. And so we made an appointment. They saw us right away. And basically what they do is they do both a skin test and a blood test. So they kind of just have like, it's like this big tray of all these different allergens, and then they turn your baby on their back, and they put like these little, they kind of prick the skin, but they don't like, just to see how the skin reacts. And so they number all the things, and they like put all the little dots on the back, and then they see which ones react. And then you also do a blood test, and through the skin test is just kind of a way to generally get an idea, but the blood test is really the one that for sure confirms whether it's an allergy. And also, like, food allergies, it doesn't mean like intolerance. Like, it's not just like your tummy gets upset, it's that your body is like trying to attack the thing that you ate because it thinks it's a poison. And so your body is like responding to that poison that they think it is, when it's really just regular food.
Right.
Um, so we went to the allergist, we did the blood test, we did the skin test, because we hadn't at that point given her peanut butter. We hadn't given her
No, I'm
eggs.
sure you were like, we're giving her nothing.
Right.
That must have been terrifying. Yeah.
We were kind of lucky in that, again, we were new parents, so we weren't like
Right.
really early to introduce food. We were
Right.
like, once we start feeding you, that's forever. So we're just gonna nurse
That's true.
until we really have to start feeding you. And so then we were able to know, like, okay, she is allergic to eggs. She cannot have eggs. She cannot have peanut butter or peanuts or tree nuts. So tree nuts are all like the walnuts, pecans, cashews, things like that. So yeah, so that's when, and then we still have that doctor. Like, she still sees her once a year to do a yearly blood work and yearly like skin tests to see where we are, to see if maybe the levels are getting lower and she's getting less allergic, or if they're getting higher and she's getting more allergic. So so that has been her whole life. So she's 14 now. So we've seen that doctor a lot. Whereas my twin that had a dairy allergy, she did outgrow that by 4. So that's why it's important to kind of keep up with just like maintenance visits. Because they both had, or, the twin had an EpiPen and Benadryl. My daughter, who's in high school now, she carries her EpiPen with her. She can self-administer. And she also she has Benadryl at school with the nurse. So if she does accidentally ingest one of her allergens, like, she can help herself right then.
Just thinking, so we have a child who has an allergy to gluten, and it's
Mhm.
pretty severe. So, I
Mhm.
mean, I think about how that completely rocked my kitchen when we found out. But because the dinner table is a place where we nurture our families. It's where we have discussions, and it's where we feed the people that we love. And so when you have this sort of interrupter of, oh, this thing that you've loved cooking forever, you can no longer cook anymore. I
Yes.
don't know about you, Vanessa, but it made me feel, I guess, inadequate as a mom. Like, I couldn't do the one thing that I was really good at. And
Mhm.
I found myself crying in my kitchen a lot. And I know that you are an amazing cook, an amazing baker. What did that do? Like, those are not small allergies. Like, what did that do to your dinner table, and sort of what did it lead to and things that you do now?
Yeah. I mean, I remember this moment all the time. So kids with food allergies also have a lot higher chance of also having eczema and also having asthma, which my food allergy kiddo does. She gets like the whole um trio. And I can remember before we knew about the food allergy, when she was diagnosed with like eczema, and the doctor was like, you just have to put this cream on her every day. And even just that was like, I can't. Like, I can't. I'm so overwhelmed already with a new baby. Like, I'm already kind of operating at as many things as I can possibly do. Just the idea of like putting a cream on, which now in hindsight, I'm like, I don't know why that broke me, but it did. Like, because I'm like, I can barely feed my child. Like, I can't.
Right.
So when the food allergy came along, I was like, that completely was like, yes, overwhelming. It was so much because it when you have a dairy food allergy, that's butter,
That's
cheese,
everything. It feels like
milk,
everything. Yeah.
and that's in everything, like smoothies, like, and then the peanuts, like, we ate a lot of peanut butter, like, eggs also. Eggs are the easiest thing you could make kids. Like, really, it was completely overwhelming, and I just did not. It took a long time. I feel like we were kind of just really shocked for a while, but after that it just was like, how am I going to do this? Motherhood is already very hard. There's already a lot to juggle. There's already a lot to learn, and then when you kind of add on this big shift in how you cook, right? And food is so important to us. Like, food is my love language. I love cooking for people and I love baking for people. So having to also shift that was just like, I mean, staggering, really. I just remember kind of being numb for a while because it is overwhelming. And ever since then, like, since learning how to cook with these food allergies and things like that, I mean, it's all manageable, but it's still a huge wave of shock at the beginning.
Sure.
And as I've known friends that have had kids, or that their kids have developed celiac or something like that, like, I see the same patterns in everybody. Everyone's just like, how are we going to do this? Like, how are we going to shift such a huge part of our life? And you do, but it's very overwhelming.
This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit. But we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app, join one of our support groups, or find one-to-one support, enjoy counseling, find loss and bereavement support, participate in a peer-to-peer mentor program, or check out our news, articles, and family stories at handtohold.org. All of that is at no cost to you. Hand to Hold's mission is to provide personalized support before, during, and after a NICU stay to help ensure that all NICU families thrive. So what did that lead to, Vanessa? Because I know not everyone does what you did, but I love how you transformed something that was overwhelming and a lot into something that's really pretty beautiful.
Oh, thanks. So the thing with food allergies is that like not only is it just like avoiding a certain ingredient, it's also making sure that ingredient doesn't at all come into contact with like what this child or person is eating. So for example, like let's say like, okay, I'm going to we stopped having peanut butter in our house. Like there are some, we still keep milk, like my other kids drink milk and we have cheese, but say for example, we continued using peanut butter in our house. If we made a peanut butter sandwich and then like gave that to one kid and then we put that knife in the sink and then we use that same cutting board to make a sandwich for my oldest, even just like the residue of the peanut butter that maybe had gotten on the cutting board could transfer to her sandwich and then she would have an allergic reaction, right? She would have an anaphylactic response to that. So it's like really when you are like food allergies are not just like, oh, I'm just going to leave that out. Like, it's like, no, you have to make sure the surfaces are clean. You have to make sure there's no like cross contact with other things that they can't eat. So it's not like I can just like cut cheese with one knife and then cut her stuff with that same knife. Like, it's just like a constant awareness of like her stuff gets made first. Her stuff has to be like with clean utensils on a clean surface. So with all of this going into school, so we found out about her food allergy as like an infant. We started her in kindergarten and we kind of came across, I mean, food allergies, we had nothing, we didn't know about it. So it's not bad that people don't know what food allergies are or like understand what it takes to feed a person with food allergies. But it became very apparent that like, oh, like so much of school revolves around food and so much of life revolves around food. So I mean, when kids get parties, what do? They get pizza and they get ice cream, neither of which she can eat. And we realized very quickly that it was like an equity thing, right? Like pizza and ice cream are not required. Like they're not a necessary part of school. Like there are other things that we can do to celebrate. Not that we mind it, but people would always be like, oh, and we'll bring her some fruit. And I'm like, well, I mean... I understand you're like trying to be accommodating, but my kid's going to sit in the corner eating fruit while everyone else is getting like ice cream sundaes and pizza. Like that's not really, if you're going to care about making it fun for some kids, like we should care about making it fun for all the kids. And her allergies are able to be accommodated. Like you could just bring dairy-free ice cream that has no nuts. Like you could bring pizza with vegan cheese or things like that. So very quickly I realized like, oh, like people are well-intentioned, but I don't think they understood like that's hard for a kid to sit there, eating a lollipop when like kids are getting these beautiful cakes or these beautiful cupcakes brought in. Like, and so I think seeing enough of that, I started baking. I started making stuff and bringing it into classrooms. At one point, I actually became the classroom mom because I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to handle, like, I'm going to be in charge of parties. Like, my kid is going to
control all the things.
Yes, I'm going to control all the food. I'm going to be able to make fun treats and she'll be able to eat them just like everybody else. And I got some pushback. Most people were very understanding and they were very happy to like, try their best to accommodate my kid. But there were some comments about like, why should my child suffer just because your daughter has a food allergy? And I'm like, well, I don't really consider my child's lifestyle suffering. And I don't really consider your child having to eat like a cupcake that has all the same ingredients except for the milk and the egg, which are substituted. So it tastes the same. And So I don't think the lack of dairy and egg in a cupcake is like your child, like causing your child suffering. Anyways, so I kind of held all those things and I thought about it and I decided that we couldn't be the only family facing this. We couldn't be the only family feeling like my child's left out often. People don't understand what it is to have food allergies very well. So that's when I decided to start a bakery because I wanted kids, even with diet restrictions, even with food allergies, to be able to celebrate with everybody else in the same way that didn't seem like less than, like, or they didn't seem like other, and that way everybody could eat the same thing and it was all delicious and it was all beautiful. And that's what kind of started me on I had been baking for years at that point, because I had to, because back 14 years ago, there was no, vegan cupcakes or vegan cakes. And if they were terrible. So, I started baking back then. And so after I'm trying to remember, maybe about 7 or 8 years, I got a little more serious about it and I started learning decorating because really I wanted everyone to be able to enjoy the same things and be as excited about the fancy cakes and the fancy cupcakes and not just have like somebody sitting in the corner eating Oreos.
Well, I mean, I can say two things is that what you create tastes amazing. It's not like sometimes I think when we think that we remove an ingredient that we're removing just the best parts of that food and it's always going to taste terrible. When in fact, you're right. Things have come a long way and substitutions that we can make with different things. And I am I can attest Vanessa's food is amazing. But also like this love of baking, like when we had our babies, you did something that no one else has ever done before and you made us a week worth of breakfast. And I remember, which honestly, I think is the best gift that you can give any new family because everyone brings dinner, and you can eat that for lunch, but you can't really eat it for breakfast. And so to have a week of breakfast was amazing. I still brag about you to all my friends. I'm like, this is the best idea ever. So I think this like love, Vanessa, probably was planted a long time ago. And then Olivia was sort of your catalyst to how you change.
Yeah.
And then, sort of introducing new families to like say, hey, like, let's just be curious. Let's be aware that you can still eat fun things. You can still do fun stuff. You just have to be aware of what people's limitations are and what they can and can't have. So you're not sucking the fun out of it. You're actually making
Right.
it more fun. And quite
Right.
frankly, it's the parents that complain. The kids that are eating it, they are
Right.
slathering that ice cream and that icing all over their faces. They don't care.
Yeah.
What I guess as we sort of enter into the holidays, Vanessa, I know that can often be really stressful. One, because it's not your kitchen, right? So you might have like various people bringing different things to the table, literally and figuratively. So,
Hmm.
what would be your advice to a family who has a child or a family member who has a food allergy and they're going to something like a holiday event where it's a little bit out of their control? Like, what are some things that they can do to make that still fun, still meaningful, but not like I need to micromanage every single thing that comes to the table? Like, what would be some things that you would suggest to them?
Right. Yes. So this was also like a work in progress, like as we like got more comfortable with like talking to people about food allergies and understanding like how we could ask for certain things. Like I feel like there's certain things that you can ask of a person to kind of gauge their ability to maybe accommodate you. Like sometimes like people just don't have never heard of food allergies and it's like completely new to them, and that's kind of maybe when we're like, okay, maybe this person is someone that we just need to talk to over time. Like if we're going to have a relationship with them over time, like we can like let them know a little bit each time. So
Oh, that's
maybe
good.
at the beginning we'll say like, you know what, why don't we bring a dish and then that way it can be a dish that is safe for our food allergy kiddo. And then like as time goes on we could say like, oh, like, well, meals where everything is kind of separate, like a taco bar is like very simple because everything can be separate. So you can still have cheese, but it's something that everybody can put what they need. And it's something that everything is kept separate. So there's not going to be a lot of like cross contact in terms of, cheese getting on her taco
Right.
bite accident or something. But so we'll ask people like, hey, our daughter has a food allergy. Have you heard of food allergies before? And then depending on their answer, right? If I was the person that somebody was telling me, like, oh, my child has food allergies, that's when I would start asking questions like, do you all keep nuts in the house? Like if they're allergic to peanuts or something, like how careful do I have to be? Like if the family uses peanut butter, then it's like, okay, it's not so allergic that I have to like, make sure I get rid of my peanut butter for that day or something. Like, so it's just kind of gauging exactly where people are and what people's comfort is. And if some people just are like, it's a big party and, there's going to be lots of different people, we'll just sometimes bring food just for her and we'll bring a safe treat. And that's kind of like, we can always do that. But if it's going over to dinner to eat with this one family, they're usually more willing to be like, okay, well, maybe we'll have this thing, but we'll just keep the cheese on the side so everyone else can add it later. So I guess I have like so many ideas. I'm trying to.
No, these are fantastic ideas. I mean, I'm thinking about, I think it sort of begs the point too, is that there are some people who prefer not to have cheese or prefer not to have gluten or prefer not to have nuts. And then there are some people that I mean, this is a life altering decision. If they ingest that, they could either end up in the ER or worse,
Mhm.
it could end badly. And so I think that sort of having that perspective that you're not being difficult or obstinate, but you
Right.
really are making sure that your child is in a safe environment as much as like if they're on a bicycle and you put them in a helmet, like these are the same things that we do there. So I think helping people understand that it's not you being a stinker, but instead you're
Right.
loving your kid. So if they're
Uh,
loving their kid, then just help them love their kids. And that goes for families too. I think families may be the hardest sell because maybe they knew you before
yeah.
and it was never a problem before, but why is it a problem now? And
Mhm.
and so I think that's so maybe give people one more tip. I know you have a bunch, but give them one more suggestion on how they can approach the holidays with joy.
Yeah, I think also having a kid with food allergies, like you just learn to be their advocate. Like there's sometimes that
Mm,
we have gone into situations where I mess up. Like I forget, like we're in a hurry and I just like didn't get to it ahead of time, like to tell the host like, oh, my daughter has these food allergies. Or like I remember one time we went to like a Christmas kind of party at one of her friends' house where they got all the families together. And I knew that they had said what the menu was, and I was like, "Oh, she'll be fine. Like she'll be able to eat some things from there." But I had it had slipped my mind. It was busy, and they had like little cups or little bowls of like mixed nuts all over the house, and I was like immediately like, "Oh my gosh, like that isn't their fault. Like that isn't
right.
their it was my fault. Like I knew the menu. The menu was going to be like tacos and it was going to be like a taco bar. So I was like, oh, it's going to be fine. She'll be able to find something to eat. Um, and I realized like, oh, that isn't this family's fault. Like that's my fault. Like I should have, and I just told her like, you just need to make sure to wash your hands before you eat. Like make sure that, we served her a plate right at the beginning so that that way if people were eating nuts and then like
Oh
getting the
yeah.
food, like there wasn't. So there were some things that we did to kind of make up for this mistake that I had made. So we got there early. We got there at the beginning. We served her food. We set it aside so that it was like safe and we covered it. That way she was all set. But I think also for people, if you're having people over to your home, I think it's always such a kind question to ask, like, do you have any food allergies or any diet restrictions that I can keep in mind when I'm setting the menu? I really think that one simple question, just are there any food allergies? Are there any diet restrictions? Even like for vegetarians or vegans, like it's important to know those things. And it's not hard to accommodate really. Like
Right.
um you always can add veggies to something. You can always like do something to accommodate these diet restrictions. So I think even just that one question, like if you were inviting people over to your home, just that very simply, let me know if you have food allergies or diet restrictions. And then if somebody comes back with a food allergy or diet restriction, just kind of being curious about it and asking some questions. Can they be in an environment where there are nuts? Like, are they so allergic that like nuts can't be at all in the vicinity? Like even just like the dust would make, because there are some kids that
Right.
can't even be in the same room as a nut, right?
Right.
Um, and yeah, just kind of gauging how you can make your home safe for other people, because we want people to feel comfortable.
Right.
We want them to feel safe in our homes. So just, yeah, being curious, asking a few questions, and then asking follow-up questions if they do have some concerns. And also, feeling free to be like, what would you, maybe you can bring a dish and we can provide this. So maybe the family with food allergies can prepare the part that maybe is like most likely to contain that food allergen, and you can do all the other stuff, right? Like
Right.
you can do the sides, or I don't know. So there's lots of like little hacks that you can do, but I just think in general, trying to make sure that you are ensuring the safety of your guests is important, and a way to really make them feel loved.
It's a great question. And I think I find myself, certainly after our son was diagnosed with his challenges, that we were like, now I start to say, like, oh, no, I don't mind bringing that, because
Yeah.
sometimes we know where an ingredient is, but who knew that gluten was in soy sauce, right? So there,
Oh, yes. That's the other question. Like, so do you have food allergies or dietary restrictions? What should I avoid? Like, what are the most common things that I should avoid?
right,
Because yes, we have some good friends that they all avoid gluten now, but their daughter has celiac. And so I asked her that, and she was like, "Oh, you can't use soy sauce." And I was like, "Oh, that was new." Like, because we don't
yeah,
avoid gluten, so we wouldn't know that unless she
right,
had, so yeah, just asking that question, like, what is the common things, like common mistakes that maybe people
right.
don't know that gluten is in?
I mean, it's the same reason why we make our own taco seasoning, because I can ensure that it doesn't have gluten in it. So yeah, you learn to adapt and grow, and I think those are really great questions. I always ask this last question just because I love, you've given us lots of advice, but I always ask this one. Vanessa, if there's a mom or a dad that's listening to this and their child has just been diagnosed with a food allergy, what would be your encouragement to them?
I guess my advice would be really just to take it one day at a time, and to be okay with feeling like it's overwhelming. I think maybe I felt bad that I had such a strong reaction to this thing that, was changing our life. And I was like, oh, I love my kid. Like, this shouldn't matter. Like, of course I'm going to do what I need to. But it was like, no, I kind of had to allow myself to sit with that overwhelm, and that like kind of like, I don't know if it's grief, but just like sadness that like I really,
Sure.
it was going to affect our life in a big way. It was going to shift a lot of things. And just allowing myself to have those feelings, and knowing that like I don't have to have all the answers tomorrow. Like, I can't become an expert in food allergies by tomorrow, and that we will,
Right.
like, you know kind of meet any challenge in life. We'll just take it day by day and learn a little bit at a time, and eventually come to a place where it seems like second nature of being able to cook like this or bake like this. Yeah, and just giving yourself some time.
That's good advice. Well, and I mean, I feel like that's sort of the mantra for every NICU mom, is just give yourself some grace and some time to figure out your new normal, and you're going to figure it out. Vanessa, thank you for all your good advice. I really appreciate it. I am so grateful that I had that conversation with Vanessa. I was thinking the holidays in general sort of bring extra pressure and a little bit of extra stress. Also, for many of you, lots of joy and things to look forward to. But I felt like it was really important to have her on. And in today's 2-minute take, there's always a couple of things that sort of stick out to me. I think that when we were talking about this overwhelming feeling and sort of taking it one day at a time, one thing that I did is I had a friend. So I mentioned in the interview that we have a son who has a gluten allergy. And that one rocked me. I did. I spent way too many days crying in my kitchen. But I will say that I called up my good friend whose son has celiac, and I asked her, I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, Catherine, just come to my house. And so she said, and bring everybody. So we brought all the kids, and she opened up her pantry, and she opened up every snack that she had, and she had the kids all try stuff, including, my kids who didn't have the allergy as well as my kid who did. And she said, I want you to try all these things that don't have gluten. And the kids are like, oh, because I think they were thinking our house is now going to be terrible. We are now going to have to eat food that tastes awful. And what Susanna reminded me is that we just have to ask. There are so many people in the world who are going through the same thing that you're going through. And so maybe you get connected to them through a preemie group or hand to hold or your neighborhood group, or someone hears that your kid has a food allergy and they have a friend who also has a kid who has a food allergy, and you connect and you feel less alone. And I think that was my main takeaway from Vanessa's interview, is that just ask people what they're doing. You don't have to figure it all out. And if you're on the other side, if you live in a household that has no allergies, ask the question that Vanessa asked and encouraged you to do was, how can we help make this a more hospitable place for you? Do you have any food allergies or restrictions that I need to know about? And what should I avoid? It's a great way to love people. It is. It's a great way to say, I love you. I want you to eat well and to feel loved at my house. So how can we make that happen? Instead of it becoming this chore or this extra task that you have to do, I think I'm just encouraging you to look at it through the lens of love. And so with that, I'll see you next time. Thanks, y'all, for listening to NICU Babies Parent Support. Every parent and every experience is welcome here. If you are a NICU parent and you're finding yourself in need of support, please download our app. You can find it in the Apple Store or on Google Play, Hand to Hold. And if you love today's episode, you can share it, you can subscribe, and you can most certainly review it. We would love, love, love your reviews. It's how we reach more NICU parents. Thanks, and I'll see y'all next time.